So again, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us at today's panel on scaling up with this scale-up. We hope you found this year's ARPA-E Summit both to be successful and valuable, and we look forward to continue that this morning as we discuss the challenges associated with scaling new energy technologies. As a reminder, please feel free to submit your questions for our panelists through this Summit app, or through the 2D code that you see on the screen right now, and we'll make sure that we can answer as many as we can. So my name is Danny Cunningham, and I'm the Deputy Director of Commercialization at ARPA-E. I'm also the Program Director for the first cohort of ARPA-E's Scale-Up projects, and I'm joined today by 4 leaders from our 17 Scale-Up teams who will introduce themselves in just a moment. But before we jump into that discussion with our panelists, let me briefly introduce the SCALEUP program to those who might not be familiar with it. SCALEUP was designed to support the scaling of potentially disruptive new technologies from a full range of ARPA-E portfolio by funding the transition of promising projects from proof of concept in the lab to products and services in the field. This is done to prevent ARPA-E technologies from being stranded in the development pathway. And in doing so, we avoid valuable IP that's funded by US taxpayers' dollars to be vulnerable to adoption by foreign competitors. At the same time, we enhance the competitiveness of US industries by developing scaling and manufacturing technologies necessary to compete in this rapidly evolving energy market. Additionally, SCALEUP helps ARPA-E meet its climate-focused mission by accelerating these transformational technological advances in areas that industry by itself is not likely to undertake because of the existing technical and financial uncertainty. So let me just go on now and tell you about some of the characteristics that make up a competitive scale-up project. One of the first ones is that underpins the scale-up project and programs is basically ownership and control of subject inventions arising from prior ARPA-E awards. And this is really important for us because it allows teams that are both inventors, but also gives the option for entities to actually license that IP to be eligible for a scale-up award. Another very important aspect, which is for scale-up, is the involvement of commercial partners, companies, and industrial participation. We see that as an overarching quality, if you like, for a competitive award in the sense that it will help the teams these founders enable their technologies into the marketplace. And the types of partners we're looking for can be a wide range of entities from potential customers, end users, suppliers, and other industry participants, even including distribution chain entities. In addition to this, we need to see a clear path to market. And at the conclusion of the scale-up project, the teams would have substantially de-risked the commercialization of their technologies. And that enables the attraction for continued growth from various funding sources, including private funding sources such as venture capital and private equity, or public sources such as maybe the Loan Program Office, just as an example. But these are just a few points that I've highlighted, and I encourage everyone who's interested to learn more about these factors around a competitive scale-up project to go to our website to look at some of the examples we have there. We'll also go to our showcase floor later on after this and talk to our awardees directly. So today, we've offered Scale-Up Forward twice, first in 2019 and again in 2021. And between those two cohorts, we have awarded 17 projects with more than $167 million worth of federal funding, not to mention the cost share that the teams bring from their commercial partners. And we hope to continue to offer this scale-up in the future to maximize the impact of the program, ARPA-E, and ARPA-E in general. So with that brief overview, I'd like now to introduce our 4 panelists today. Each of them has a leadership role in one of the scale-up teams, and they're joining us to discuss the challenges with scaling these energy technologies, as well as the impact that the scale-up program will have for them, and in the case of the newer teams, will have in the future. So we'll start with Shreya, I'll ask to introduce herself and share a bit about her company and technology, her prior ARPA-E awards, and what SCALEUP project, what she hopes to achieve in her SCALEUP project.
Thank you, Danny. My name is Shreya. I'm the co-founder and CEO at VIA Separations, and our focus is decarbonizing industry by focusing on the chemical sector. We use about 12% of US energy consumption, separating raw materials and chemicals from one another, roughly the same way we've done it since the Industrial Revolution, using evaporators and distillation columns. And so VIA Separations comes in, we have a bolt-on product that allows pulp mills, refineries, other manufacturing facilities to run their separation more energy efficiently, so about 90% less energy, fully electrifiable process, and increased production through typically a bottleneck as part of their process. We focus today, we're launching in the pulp and paper industry, which was enabled entirely by an ARPA-E Open Award. We had been focused on a path to revenue that we thought was a little bit faster and a little bit easier, a little lower barrier to technology entry or burden of proof. And ARPA-E came along and allowed us to develop a pilot that convinced the industrial customers, industrial sector, that we could do all the things we said we could do for the scales that they're talking about. Since then, our SCALEUP award is focused on meeting some aggressive unit economic targets that allow us to access parts of the market that aren't just early adopters or burning need, but also have large emissions impacts and kind of get to the impact scale that really matters to us as a company, as a world, and as a country.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Okay, so now I'd like to go into Lane of SwitchSource. So thank you very much, Shreya.
Good morning. I'm Lane Nelson, one of the co-founders of SwitchSource, and what we've done is commercialize a power router for the electricity grid. And so this is using sensitive power electronics at medium voltages, like 4,000 to 15,000 volts, which, if you know power electronics, is kind of a tricky thing to do. But basically, using commoditized, low-cost components, semiconductors, stacking them together and controlling them in such a way that we can connect directly to those higher voltages and shuttle power back and forth from line to line or even circuit to circuit out on the grid. And the primary benefits of that being dramatically improved resiliency, overall flexibility. And then if you're talking about just connecting different loads and generation sources, really you can then incorporate a whole lot more distributed energy resources, up to 2 times with our technology out there. So we've been around since 2017, and our story definitely starts with ARPA-E. So Danny was actually the tech to market advisor on our circuits project. Dialing back even just a little bit further than that, some of the core IP was developed at Michigan State University under the Genie program of ARPA-E, starting back in 2011, I believe that was. I think so. Mm-hmm. And so we had nothing to do with that. So we're one of the licensing stories. So we came on the scene in 2016, licensed that technology from MSU. We're very fortunate to get a Plus Up award, still under the Genie program, that really launched this company. So could not have done that without that support. And so that was translated over into a circuits award, and there's also an ESTCP award, I should say ARPA-E award in partnership with ESTCP in there. Which is the DOD. Which is the DOD. Collaboration. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've as you can tell, we've gotten a lot of support from ARPA-E, which has been critical for us and our technology. And that leads us up to SCALEUP. And so through SCALEUP, we've really gone since 2021, from still being in that R&D state to develop a commercial unit that we can actually sell to electric utility companies, to now emerging from R&D, we'd say late last year, and we are selling this equipment now to utility companies. So this is our debut commercial year, and so it's off to the races, and we feel like a new set of challenges around supply chain and hiring and the sales cycles are still a bear, but that's where we're at today.
Oh, excellent. Oh, thank you, Lane. So Alan, on to you.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Good morning. I'm Alan Bradshaw. I'm the Chief Manufacturing Officer for Inventwood. I know a lot of people here today have stopped by the booth over the last few days, so I don't want to repeat the story that you may have heard, but we are essentially a spin-off technology from UMD right here in DC backyard. Company was founded in 2016. The technology that we have, the way I describe it to people is it's not a product, it's a material. And like DuPont invented nylon, this is a material that has thousands of uses, and we won't invent all the uses. We will invent and supply the material, and it will go into products. It is, in essence, a densified wood beyond the scale of any densification that's possible in the natural world. It's done by modifying the lignin in the wood at the cellular level. It allows us to move the fibers in the cellulose and gain this incredible strength, stronger than steel in tension. So it's a material that we see as a substitute for steel in construction. We started with an ARPA-E Open Award and recently have been the recipients of the SCALEUP. So we spent the first few years trying to develop the technology to a point where the process could be now adopted to a manufacturing setting. With the SCALEUP Award right now, we're building a facility in Frederick, Maryland. We'll be moving in our lab in there in September, August, September, and then next year we'll begin commercial production of metal. The product name is Metalwood. So we're really grateful for the help from ARPA-E. Again, couldn't have done it without that funding, and we're really, really looking forward to getting the commercial enterprise up and running.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Thank
Thank you. Didn't realize it was Frederick, Maryland. That's great. Okay, Greg, over to you.
Great. So yeah, my name is Greg. I'm a co-founder and the Chief Technology Officer for LongPath and Professor of Mechanical Engineering at University of Colorado. So LongPath has built the first truly scalable means to continuously sort of 24/7 monitor emissions coming off of oil and gas infrastructure. And I used to say that LongPath was a child of the Department of Energy. I think we can now officially say that we're a full-grown adult descendant of ARPA-E. We were born under the 2014 Monitor program, where ARPA-E had the foresight to recognize that the oil and gas industry had an emissions issue and that we wanted to attack that by going after cost-effective means to get after these, to find and locate these emissions. And so my team at University of Colorado and NIST had just shown that we could make these really precise measurements of greenhouse gases over long distances, albeit with sort of a room-sized $500,000 laser. It's called a frequency comb. It was just fresh off the Nobel Prize. And so Monitor allowed us to bring this down to sort of cabinet-sized, fraction of the cost device that we could put out into real oil field environments. We were just starting to do our first commercial deployment with an oil and gas company, timed perfectly with the end of the Monitor program and COVID. COVID hit, as you all know, oil prices went negative, and that's not a great time to be working with the oil and gas industry. But we were able to take the support of that first customer, approach ARPA-E around the SCALEUP program. And I can kind of truly say that selection for the moment we kind of were selected for that SCALEUP program is when LongPath crossed that valley of death. It immediately triggered our seed round of funding. And then under SCALEUP, we were one of the 2019 cohort. Under SCALEUP, we've been able to go from one customer to 19, from 3 systems in the field to 750 square miles of monitoring oil and gas infrastructure with LongPath systems. Grown to 45 employees and just closed a $30 million Series A. So it's been kind of the rocket fuel that SCALEUP sort of promised for our company. And so I'm happy to be here and share that experience and help others to get over that valley as well.
No, that's great. That's a really great introduction from all the 4 panelists. It gives you the very different sectors, very different technologies, different parts of ARPA-E all coming together and SCALEUP helping you in your journey. And I think what's a really interesting question maybe we can go on to next is how do you determine because SCALEUP is new, as I mentioned. It was 2019. We just started the program. So when those FOAs came out on the street and you read them, and you said, how do you determine that SCALEUP was really a good fit for your company's needs at where you were at the time of your maturity of a company, and as a result, how did you sort of prepare for SCALEUP and the application? I don't know who we should start with. We can start with the end. We can go to Shreya. That's what's closest to me. Shreya, where do you want to start?
Okay. So we were at this interesting kind of intersection of de-risking technology, having started to show the commercial potential with our customers, but we knew that from where we were in that moment to where we needed to be at the commercial scale was not only 100x scale up from a technology perspective, but we had to come down the cost curve. We had to come down the cost curve on supply chain, on operations, on automation, and then specifically on the chemistry that feeds into the unit economics of the whole system. And so we were trying to figure out how best to fund that. And we have been very fortunate. We've raised venture capital dollars. We've had some great mentors and advisors across what I'll call the capital stack in terms of investors. But venture capital dollars are an expensive way to do field deployments. They're an expensive way to iterate on a technology and bring that technology risk down. And so ARPA-E is the right intersection of focused on commercialization, but also very technology focused. And not only, putting together that application made us realize, A, this is really important for us to do, but then second of all, the feedback and the validation that came out of the review process was important for us, knowing we're going down the right path, but also important to validate to external investors that this is both a commercially viable business and that the technology has been vetted by external parties.
Okay, that's excellent. And
Yeah, I think that was maybe the perfect answer. I would echo pretty much everything that you just said, Shreya. For us, it's, I think when we first learned about SCALEUP, we almost kind of fell out of our chairs because we're so excited about it. For a few reasons. One of those is that part of our core philosophy as a company, and also just trying to learn from some of the companies that came before us with at least somewhat similar technologies that had fallen into what we would call a capitalization trap, which is from our point of view, overcapitalizing too early, and then still being too far away from actual commercial sales, and then needing to continue to justify higher and higher valuations. And every company is different, but at least in our space specifically, we saw the writing on the wall that we could potentially be in that trap if we were to take on the venture capital that we needed, around that time, because we still had a long haul. And so for us, SCALEUP presented that opportunity to continue to de-risk the rest of the technology. Well, first of all, just to get the technology ready through R&D, but then also really what we're doing through SCALEUP is now de-risking it with our customers, the electric utility companies, through demonstration projects, which is essential for them to even consider buying at scale, given how conservative they are. So in any case, SCALEUP has been that for us, and instrumental in that way. In terms of preparation, we threw everything we had at it. We were only a 4-man team at the time. It was really kind of 2 of us working on that application. Brought in advisors, talked to investors, that we did have at that point, just to get their advice on how to best position this. And so we definitely sought a lot of outside counsel on how to position ourselves the best when we were approaching that. But it was nerve-wracking as we were pulling it together, because we felt like we had a lot riding on it.
all right, thank you, Lane.
I think that's a great answer, although unlike Lane, I can't say we've had the problem of being overcapitalized yet. I'm looking forward to that. So, but I think this falls down to, as everyone knows, it's extremely difficult to take something from the lab to a commercial production environment. That's probably one of the greatest challenges there is when you have an invention. I think the scale-up process for us, same thing, we threw everything at it. But it was, we had spent the early part, like everyone, on the R&D, on perfecting the process, the technical development. And we'd taken the technical development a long way. And I think what the scale-up does is it makes you focus on the commercial and the manufacturing. And you have to tie those together. You know, you have to have that path, a clear path to commercial success. You have to see the ability to take a process that you've only witnessed happen in a laboratory and actually see it in machines in a production environment. And that's the process helps you work your way through that maze, I think, in great detail. So it was well worth it to do it for sure. It benefited all of our team at the end, and you know, here we are. So we're ready to go. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would say that like many of the teams that I see walking around the floor, LongPath is ultimately enabled by hardware. It's a hardware-enabled data service. And when we went out originally to raise a seed round before SCALEUP, there was a lot of concern about the remaining hardware risk. Same thing, we needed to really continue to bring that cost down and manufacturability up in our system. And the nice thing that SCALEUP did was remove that hardware risk. And so when we went to the investors to trigger that seed round after SCALEUP selected us, it was smooth. I mean, it was really easy because the conversation was no longer about the hardware. It was about, you know, product market fit, customer acquisition, all of that for the seed round. So I think that's critical probably to 50, 80, and 90% of the teams in here, I would guess.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. There's definitely a theme, a common theme running through your approaches and how SCALEUP has helped you. And I think, Alan, you touched on a point I think it would be really good to continue the discussion on. You know, SCALEUP we are ARPA-E, so we are high risk, high return, and the same is for SCALEUP too. The risk change with respect to we look for technical risk to be somewhat, you know, resolved, not completely resolved, but resolved, and there's a clear pathway. So that evolves into an engineering risk, right, associated with that. So there's still risk to do that from manufacturing or validating reliability, et cetera, of product and processes. But I'm just wondering, how do you feel as a panel, how do you see balancing that remaining engineering risk that you're working with your products and processes offers, and also have to establish and develop that in parallel, that commercial approach as well, because outreach to customers, you're balancing it. It sounds like it's a very difficult balance to do, and say more so than in say an open or a focus project. So how do you do that? What's your advice to the audience with respect to balancing that in a scale-up project?
I think, yeah, I can lead that one off. The truth is, you know, you get the sales and marketing folks in the room with the hardware and engineering team and make them arm wrestle over. Because, you know, for us, sales and marketing was trying to push out into the oil field as fast as they could. And meanwhile, the engineering team and the manufacturing team were trying to enable that. But you don't want to go out so quickly with customers that, you know, you put, you know, an earlier generation of hardware that's
right, set expectations, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. So we tried to limit ourselves. You know, each oil and gas company can be quite large out in the field. And so we tried to kind of balance. We would look at how big could a customer be when we were working to acquire customers, and then kind of balance that with how quickly we thought we could scale the manufacturing and produce a good product that went into the field. And so it, you know, it basically came down to a little bit of arm wrestling, and we make the engineering team a little bit uncomfortable and the sales team a little bit uncomfortable. So, yeah.
I think that's funny, because another way to look at that is, you know, do you make something and sell it, or do you sell something and make it? Exactly. And I've been on both ends of that, and I can say that selling it and making it is the right approach. So to put the effort, oftentimes when you're commercializing something, the effort is all up front in the technical development. You want to make it perfect. You want to make everything perfect. You want to figure all these problems out, and then, okay, now I'll go look at the sales side. Well, don't do that. Put the effort into going out and looking at the market, talking to the customers, getting that toe in the door, because if you're in a situation where you've started up a manufacturing facility and you're sitting on inventory, that's not a good place to be. So I think the effort, the TEA, the techno-economic analysis portion of the scale-up, really forces you, I think, in a good way to understand your costs, to understand the economics of not only your production, but the costs of selling, and which are also very important. So yeah, I think I would advise people to really focus your energy and resources on the market side.
Yeah, I would once again kind of echo what both of you said. You know, but also add to it that you know, so for us, as Alan was saying, the question of, you know, make it before you sell it or sell it before you make it, that was an essential, you know, part of our sort of our path up until today, in the sense that had we waited to really try selling it, to really get out there and not just talk to customers, but I mean really it's prospecting even before the technology is, you know, is fully there, really informed the rest of product development. So we have features in our products that are a result of those conversations, because when you really get to that last, you know, or let's say the last 50% of trying to sell someone on it, that's when some of those extra details come out about what's going to potentially kill that project. So having that information was really powerful for us. But yeah, I would also echo it's been a battle in terms of prioritizing those. I'm not sure that we've found the right or perfect balance yet, but some healthy tension I think is good for everybody.
Yeah, you sure. I would just mention as well that you find when you start working with customers early and you haven't perfected everything, you quickly find out which customers are interested, right? So you really do want to have a customer who understands that you're working hard at developing this and you haven't perfected it. Those are the kind of customers you want to do business with, in my opinion. So I think it's a healthy thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I completely agree with that. I think just the variety of your first customer matters so much, because it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to learn something when you deploy your first of a kind, and that's, I think, part of the sales process in the early end, and it's going to change, you know, as we get down the cost curve or the operations curve. That's absolutely going to change. But if there isn't a customer who understands that this is new and understands that they are taking a leap and has a motivation to take that leap, or a burning need, whether that's financial or regulatory or whatever else it is, it's not going to be, it's a long-term relationship, and it can't just be contractual, it can't just be black or white. That kind of push and pull is going to mimic that healthy tension, I like that phrase, between the engineers and the sales teams that is happening within the organization. That's also going to happen between you and the customer.
Right. Yeah, that's again a common theme. Different markets, different technologies, but a common theme running through there. So let's talk a little bit about the commercialization partners. I know that I'm getting some questions from the audience as well. And by the way, please continue to send in your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. But a question from the audience around sort of what's for SCALEUP, ARPA-E requires an emphasis on commercialization partners. And so what were you looking for in a commercialization partner in order to apply for SCALEUP, and then continuing on into your SCALEUP project for those that are that are further down the line in that point? So what were some of the challenges with working with some of the more larger established companies, and how have you addressed those?
I can jump in there. So for us, and one of the things, and actually we were just talking about this before we came in here, in terms of some of those partners, just in terms of tackling some of the supply chain issues, especially in an environment like we're in today. So this is a little bit more directed at supply chain, but from a partnership perspective, large CMs, distributors and suppliers, they're all potentially more careful than ever about who they're choosing to do business with based on risk. And especially on the contract manufacturing side, if you're asking them to actually consume some of their own resources to take a bet on you in producing your product. And so anyhow, the way that we've tackled some of that is by bringing in people to our company who have been around, in this space, sort of like veterans of this space, that have the relationships. because it's like so many other things, but in supply chain now, the relationships are everything in terms of having that person that you've known for a while, at that distributor or at that manufacturer, to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I know that you guys are tight on this component, 2-year lead times, but we're really not asking for a lot relative to the EVs that are the EV manufacturers that are scooping up boatloads of those components. Can you send us what to them is a few? So that kind of dynamic has been really important. But then just from a credibility perspective, bringing in some partners like ARPA-E, I think is a perfect example of like that credibility voucher and stamp of approval, walking into conversations with partners and customers. We've also engaged organizations like EPRI and NREL, and NYSERDA has also been instrumental in a lot of our work too. But having sort of this stable of really kind of brand name and recognized partners, just to sort of borrow their credibility when we're walking into these conversations has also been really important for us.
Yeah, it's a big question, Danny. Yeah. We chose to work with CertainTeed. We have a material that we felt, as a substitute for steel, the CO2 benefit of metalwood is just huge. So we turn to the built environment. Buildings represent an enormous amount of in their construction and operations, CO2 emission, and so we dreamt big, and we went after buildings. But so we've said if we can replace 40% of construction grade steel globally for that just goes into buildings, that's a 1.3 gigaton CO2 opportunity every year. So to get into how do you get into the built environment so we went to and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but we approached a big player in the industry in CertainTeed. They're a large siding manufacturer. They have a lot of resources, a lot of technical resources. They can validate. We do our testing in the lab. They do the testing. They validate what we validate. And having their market presence and the ability to really understand, how big is the market, what segment should we go after, I think they were very helpful, very helpful. Okay. But we chose, an easy entry into the built environment, I shouldn't say easy, an easier entry point in cladding, and that's why we chose CertainTeed. But certainly we're going to have to work with other building, large companies that support building materials, in addition to CertainTeed.
Okay, that's great. That's a great example. Thank you.
I guess on the LongPath side, again, oil and gas in late 2019, early 2020 was an interesting spot. So in continuous monitoring, that's a big jump from what had been done before in the industry, and a bit of a scary jump for many of the operators. So I've said this before to many people who have come by our booth, but at the time we felt like we were in a swimming pool by ourselves and everybody was crowded around it, wondering how the water is. And so what you're really looking for is that crazy friend that will just jump in and join you.
Great analogy. I like it.
So we found that crazy friend in one of our particular first customers that was really interested in what could be done with continuous monitoring and kind of willing to stick their neck out and give it a try. And so I think that's something many teams will find themselves in. Once you get the first one in, then now other people will come in and say, oh, the water's fine, come on in, So you look for that kind of market maker type of attitude in a customer, I think, for us.
In our space, we call that, for utilities, we say that most utilities like to be the first to be second. Is definitely kind of that mentality. Yeah.
That's another great.
I know a lot of first to be second customers too. One thing to add is that I think opportunities like SCALEUP and other government programs, whether they're grants or incentive programs, help narrow the impedance mismatch between large corporates and startups selling to them. And that's necessary, right? Because it's our mission and our focus to go as fast as we possibly can. And it's our customers' focus and mission to make sure that we don't mess anything up at their facility. And so being able to kind of both, okay, let's vet this externally, maybe we're slowing down a little bit, maybe they're speeding up a little bit, and getting to the place where we're within the same regime. SCALEUP was really helpful for that as we were kind of going down the commercialization pathway with some of our customers, with some of our suppliers. It's a forcing function. It's a deadline, but it's not one that is impossible to meet.
Right, and that's a really great point, Shreya, because the whole reliability aspect of project technologies that come out of the lab, they have to mature to a point for a customer acceptance. So we hope with SCALEUP support that's exactly the sort of thing that you can do to actually productize your technologies, so to speak, make them commercial ready, and because they're obviously, as you grow in scale, there's after scale up, there's liabilities associated with that as well from product, and you're developing your own brand as well and knowledge, right? That's great. Well, thank you. So maybe we can change track a little bit now with respect to investors and how you interact those. So as all awardees, as ARPA-E awardees, well, you're all awardees now, but focused projects and open projects, they can be you have very sort of hardware-based complex technologies. And that can often be, from a point of view, maybe daunting or for some venture capitalists. So how does that factor in you securing your ability to secure funds? And I know you're at all different stages with respect to the levels of funds that you've raised, but how have you been able to sort of help validate your company's successes and also communicate clearly sort of gaps that you need to bridge to investors to help to be successful to secure funds now, previously, and in the future?
I would say that one of the things that we did was again, go to those investors and say, we were just selected out of 200 teams. So the Department of Energy, kind of vetting process can be really seen as a technical vetting process that investors at this point understand and can rely on. And so that was huge, again, to shift the conversation from, is this a hardware business, or are we doing, are we selling data, which is something that they tend to like a little bit more with the recurring costs. So I think also adjusting, of course, everybody's heard this by now, but kind of looking for business models that will kind of have that evergreen flavor in terms of not just selling one thing that then it's gone and off in the ether and you need to support it. It's something that will kind of continue to bring in revenue for your business. And so it was kind of interesting in a business like ours where we put equipment into the oil field to think about how to build that as a business that they will accept and that will kind of give us a recurring revenue stream. So once we kind of crack that, put that together with the ARPA-E stamp of approval, if you will, that then greased the skids to get the investors moving.
Yeah, it's interesting. 20 years ago, if I walked into a customer and said, I can save CO2 and I want more money, the doors didn't open very often, right? But I can, 5 years ago. But I can tell you, actually, that's changed. And I think to answer the question, you want to go look for investors that actually believe what you believe. And they share the idea that we have to do something. And by the way, the inventions that we're discovering, they're no longer, I want more money. I want the same money. They're now, or less. They're cost advantaged in some cases. So I believe if you match the right investor with what you're trying to do, and by the way, there's a huge emerging investment community looking for these kind of opportunities, I think that's the best approach. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
I would totally agree that it feels like it's changed dramatically for us, even in the last, even 3 years. So coming out of the first wave of like what we would call Cleantech Investment, with energy storage and solar, like in the early to mid 2000s. Then in the 20 teens. Going to an investor, walking into that room and saying something like, if you're calling yourself Cleantech and hardware, and then for us, and oh yeah, by the way, utilities are our customers. Like, I don't know what has more stink on it, in terms of trying to get them excited about investing in you. But that has, from our perspective, not changed completely, but changed quite a bit in terms of just the reception that we get from VCs. There's just a lot more VCs that are open-minded, more patient capital. out there that are not just looking for that 3 or 5 year and purely financial return and exit, but thinking about it more in terms of impact and a partnership as opposed to just a check. So again, hasn't changed completely, but I think it's definitely, we've talked about it a lot of times, it's heading in the right direction. So very encouraged by that.
I agree with everything.
Okay, that's great.
I could maybe add one
so we've actually,
quick point.
Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
One other thing that we may, and I'm curious if the other panelists see this as well, is we may be in kind of an interesting period where what we saw when LongPath went out for the Series A is that investors, much larger, later stage investors, were starting to reach further up the pipe, if you will, to the earlier technologies and start to look at them and invest in them. In part because of this rapid shift we've seen in the last few years, and the fact that there's not so many technologies farther along in the pipeline for a bigger growth investment fund to invest in. So curious if others have noticed this, and we may just be in a little bit of a window here where you can pull in a later stage investor.
We've certainly seen that, and I think it's really helpful as we think about our future capital stacks. Like, I understand the past that we've had, or the early stage venture capital sector, fairly well, but as we deploy larger systems and more systems, we'll be employing project finance and debt and making our way towards true bankability. And I think bringing in later stage investors helps us see that pathway more clearly and prepare us from a technology risk perspective, and a commercial risk perspective.
We've seen it. I would say we've seen it too, in terms of coming up earlier. And the other thing that's a little bit interesting is private equity. It seems like has also come into the mix. Not for us. I wouldn't say that generally speaking, private equity has come all the way up to us. But generally, historically, private equity has been more for really late stage companies. That have stable revenues, and it's more of a optimization game. But we're seeing PE come into fairly early stage companies now more and more alongside venture capital. And so just one more example of what you're talking about there, Greg.
Yeah, I think it's an outcome of heavily carbonized industries that realize they can't continue. And now is the time. So I believe that's going to happen rapidly. Yeah.
That's great. So maybe there's a sort of angle on that last discussion around funding and fundraising. So how do you balance the pursuit of even if it's aspirational, how you might do that in the future if you're not doing it right now, but venture capital versus some non-dilutive funding, maybe from OSED or LPO or other sorts of sources? How do you see that play in your companies, or even from a general point of view? How do you see that?
I can start. I think different flavors of capital have different uses and different ideal uses, and sometimes it can't all be perfectly ideal and perfectly optimized. But for example, SCALEUP is a very technically focused, commercialization focused, but technical backing and vetting type of capital, and so that's where we use it. Whereas we use other types of dollars to run our sales process, or so on and so forth. And to your point about LPO or OSED, I think they're very, a FOA for OSED is going to be very specific as to what they're looking for. And I'm a big believer of leveraging non-dilutive capital, obviously, sitting here today, but also leveraging it for something that is core to your business, as opposed to a side project, or as opposed to something that's going to be distracting. And that's, I think, an important part of kind of mushing together the various forms of capital. I think that gets more complex the later stage you go, and we're learning as we go.
Okay.
One thing I just recently learned, I think it's partly because we're in DC, but also spending time with DOE folks, is there's a certain way to say those acronyms. Like, I've been saying SBIR for a long time, but somebody and I were speaking past each other yesterday because apparently there's sivers around here. So OSED, I haven't heard it called OSED yet. I was still calling it OCED, but so that's good.
I might have made that up.
Yeah, that's right. They're all forming.
Okay. So for us, I mean, I would say it's still definitely part of our longer term, strategy and path, especially on like the project finance side of things. So project finance still is another big hurdle to overcome if you're talking about really meaningful project portfolios and deployments. And in our case, again, is with utility companies. And going into a traditional institution that does that type of financing, technology risk is not something that they want to see as part of the risk that they're exposing themselves to, generally speaking. And so just the idea of LPO, as one example, I think is something that we absolutely intend to explore as a way to overcome that and to scale that much faster with larger and larger projects without having to worry about that as much, or at least having somebody on the other side of the table that understands the kind of challenges that we're up against and is more accepting or has a greater appetite for that kind of risk.
I think for us, we're still in the aspirational phase of funding. We've had some early funding, but I would say the reception we've had with the investors we've talked to has been very, very good. But I would say if there's any investors out here in the audience today, come and see me after.
That's great. I think I would just echo Shreya's comments that you can mix these different forms of capital in an optimal way. One thing I would say, having taken LongPath from a handful of people to a much larger company is getting a really good finance person on board is amazing. So we've hired a CFO that came out of infrastructure capital, and he came in and said, okay, here's the game plan. Do this, do this, do this. And it's something that I, as an engineer, didn't know I didn't know. So
Absolutely.
I think I would encourage folks to round out their teams with all these different kind of skill sets that will understand when to use LPO, when to use venture.
Okay, that's great.
Amen.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry, Alan.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's we've done the same thing. We've brought in a top-notch finance person, and it makes a world of difference. You have to bring that discipline in early on. Yeah.
Okay, so let's. So we've got a little bit of time left. So tell me about certifications in your various industries for your product processes, and how do you manage? What sort of barriers? So they can be very significant barriers to entry. I remember when I worked in the PV industry, getting the products certified IEEE, IEC standards, UL, it was a big barrier to entry. So how do you? What sort of barriers do you have, or what sort of issues, challenges do you have in that area for certification and regulations to get your products into the marketplace?
I might start that one because this is there's no more heavily regulated, well, other than maybe the nuclear industry, but the building codes in the U.S. are a minefield to navigate. The regulatory environment, it's a good question. It's very difficult. It starts for us with a lot of ASTM certifications, so standard testing, getting quality control, but you have to meet an incredible array of standards before you can put something in a structure that people are going to live in and work in. We have to get as well, you pick a path of least resistance. So for us, I mentioned earlier, we chose cladding as our first entry because cladding has very few actual building code requirements, other than durability and some protection that does require some certification. But it's nowhere near a structural element, for example. So I think we've looked at the building environment and said, okay, what is our path in the building environment over time? And we will take on the code challenges and the regulatory environment, but we're going to start with the easy ones and move in over time. And we have to do that if you want to grow the company. You can't start with the most difficult thing, or you just won't get launched.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And your points are reliable. Okay, that's very good. So with respect to your product designs, let's sort of moves on from validation of your and certifications and those issues. With respect to your product designs, what did you do what are your hopes within or your aspirations within your SCALEUP project now, or even some for SCALEUP 2019? Our two panelists here at SCALEUP. What have you done with your products? How has SCALEUP helped you productize your technologies, bring them closer to the market from the lab? What approaches are you taking for that?
I could maybe touch on that one. So our hope, this may be our last summit that we're required to come to, because it's the kind of the end of our scale.
You can always come, Greg.
Not required.
But I had, on day one, I remember seeing some of the later technologies, the very first summit we came to, and where they bring the whole thing and everybody can touch and feel it. I always thought, love to bring a LongPath system. And so actually we have one at our booth. This is our first year to have a full operational system. And it's because under SCALEUP, we brought it down to just a suitcase sized. So we, brought it in a carry-on and set it up and put it together. And so I think for us, it's all about kind of making it as manufacturable as possible, as small as possible. Because the fact that we can bring it to DC in a carry-on luggage piece also makes it much, much easier to get down to the oil field, to these remote areas, to do swap, hot swap replacement of products and things. And so that's been our whole focus, is to put it in a suitcase and bring it to the summit. And then that had a huge impact.
I don't know if Greg, you can do that.
I don't think we'll ever fit
Mission
in a suitcase, but that is a very similar path. We're about 1 month into our SCALEUP contract, so no demonstrable results just yet, but bringing size of the capital equipment, cost of the capital equipment, cost of operating expenses on an annual basis, reduce power consumption. Those are all pieces that will come out of our work for SCALEUP.
Yeah, so for us at this point in SCALEUP, I mean, it has actually been really, really important to have SCALEUP behind us as we have optimized our product designs. And so, like, similarly, can't fit in a suitcase. These are 4-ton or 7-ton pieces of equipment. Just for context, that get deployed out there. But one of our two products, for example, we need to go back and understand the percentage size reduction, because that's still a very recent thing. But it has become substantially more compact and streamlined for not just physical size, but manufacturability, which for our customer, because these boxes go out under the distribution lines, and you have that NIMBY, not in my backyard mentality that most people don't like to see, monstrous, green boxes, everywhere out, just out in the landscape. And so, anyways, we've already made a substantial gain in that, and we're already talking about how we can, make substantial additional gains. But just over the last, whatever that is, 18 months, I would say it has been substantial.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, David. So one area we haven't talked about yet, which I think is really key and an important element for SCALEUP in our selection process, is building the team out, right? So, all of you are founders in one way or the other. Greg came from university environment, Shreya MIT, etc. So what are some of the key sort of non-technical skill sets that are needed to transition your technologies and build your company out? So I think Greg, you mentioned finance. But what other ones are there that you need to build out in order to grow rapidly?
Product management. So we touched on it just a few minutes ago. If you got to get into the market early. You got to start that sales process early. You need product management expertise. So bringing people in who have launched products, specifically in the market segment you're going after, that's even better. I think Lane talked earlier about bringing in, on the supply chain issue, everyone laments the supply chain, the status of the supply chain today and how difficult it is. If you bring in people who have dealt with that supply chain for a number of years, old guys like me, you have the relationships. So you know the vendors, you know the machine suppliers, you know the customers in some cases, or the raw material suppliers, and those relationships matter. So I think bringing in experience in the team is really, really critical in all areas, actually. But no more so in the product, I think the product side and this supply chain management. So for example, you know, I've had relationships with the manufacturers of the equipment we are going to need to put in our plant. And in my conversations with them, they can say, you know, Alan, you really should get your order in by April 1st. And they don't tell me it's because there's another customer and here's who it is and here's what they're gonna, but they know that, you know, they're not, I'm not gonna think about that as they're just trying to leverage me. There's a relationship that's been formed, and I know it's the right thing to do. So those things are important, especially when you've got the conditions we have today, where 2-year lead time items, 12-month lead time items. It really slows the business down if you can't do that. So I would say get some experience.
Okay, exactly. All right, explain.
Just briefly, I would say scrappiness is a skill set that I think can be learned and is absolutely required. Especially, you know, going after customers requires a lot of persistence because they're not sort of waiting there with open arms. Yeah, just the mentality, you know, that you're, you know, willing to take big risks. I think is the other thing that we've had to remind ourselves how to continue to work on. Presentation skills is the other thing I wanted to say there. For us, something that we have practiced, we've, you know, worked with people to practice time and time again, because, you know, at the end of the day, whether you're talking to a supplier, to a customer, to a partner, you have to sell them on the technology so that they can see past the risks and really think about the future. And no matter how good the technology is, if you can't translate that message, it's just a lot harder to make progress.
Okay.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think as an engineer running a technology company, it's very easy to assume you kind of have a whole purview of the scope, and that's not true. So knowing what you don't know or knowing what you're not great at is also, I think, really important, and bringing in people who are better than you at all of those things, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because everyone's going to be better at their job than you are.
I guess I would add, having, you know, again, grown the team from small to large, it was important for us to recognize that every kind of successful company appears to have a visionary and have an integrator. And the visionary is kind of setting the course, and the integrator is making sure that we're actually getting there. And that can be the same person when the company is small enough that it's a tractable problem. But pretty quickly, when we were kind of getting into the, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 plus region, having a visionary and an integrator as two separate roles in the company, which is really maybe a CEO and a COO, really, was critical. And I don't think I didn't understand that until we got to the other side of it. Right. Once again, kind of like the finance person, you know, as professors love to think that they can do everything, right? And so,
exactly.
And so I think I think you get to the other side, you look back and you say, oh, okay, I didn't know what I didn't know in terms of what is possible with an operating officer and a really good CEO.
Exactly. It's such a key part of all scale-up projects is building that team out, and not knowing what you don't know is one of the painful lessons that we have to go through to make that change. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much out of time right now. I know there's a lot more questions on my iPad that's come up here, and unfortunately we can't get to them right now, but I do encourage everyone to meet with us after this panel. Go down to the remaining time on the showcase floor in the aisle for the scale-up projects and you can talk to not just our 4 panelists here, but everyone that is involved in scale-up. So we very much welcome you to do that. And with that, I'd like to thank the panelists for an excellent discussion today. And thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the final day of the summit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.